everyone, and welcome to this deep dive just for you. We're taking on China's economic rise, a topic that's been in the news, well, forever, it seems.
Yeah, it feels that way sometimes, doesn't it?
It really does. We'll be using a 2019 report, kind of long, but really good, from the Congressional Research Service.
Yeah.
It's called China's Economic Rise: History, Trends, Challenges, and Implications for the United States.
Catchy.
I know, right? So in like 40 years, China's gone from poverty and being isolated to a global power, economically speaking.
It's a huge shift. And they're number one in a lot of ways now. Think about it.
Okay.
Biggest economy by purchasing power parity, top in manufacturing. They're leading merchandise trade.
Wow.
And they've got more foreign exchange reserves than anyone else. It's impressive.
But get this, in 1820, they already had the largest economy.
What?
Wild, right?
History has these twists and turns, yeah.
So we're going to figure out what happened in between,
Sounds like a plan.
Let's start before 1979. China was a command economy back then.
Right, like the Soviet Union.
Centrally controlled, inefficient, closed off from the world.
And it kept them poor. Per capita GDP, what the average person has, was way behind places like Japan, which were growing fast.
Then comes Deng Xiaoping. Pragmatic guy famously said, "It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice."
I love that quote.
Me too. Ideology wasn't the priority anymore. It was getting things done. That's when the reforms kicked in.
And what happened then?
Huge changes. From 79 to 2018, their GDP grew 9.5% on average each year.
Whoa.
Yeah, like their economy doubled every 8 years.
That is incredible growth.
Two things drove it: massive investment in infrastructure and industry, and productivity gains, meaning they got more out of their resources.
Like imagine a factory suddenly making twice as many cars with the same people.
Exactly. Then think about the 2008 crisis. Everyone was panicking, but China. They launched this huge stimulus to keep growing.
Smart. Did it work?
Their GDP still grew 9.7% on average through all that chaos. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, is China bigger than the U.S. economically?
It's the question everyone asks.
The answer: it depends. We usually hear about nominal GDP, a simple measure, but then there's PPP.
Purchasing power parity.
Right.
Levels the playing field, right?
Exactly. Think of it this way. What a dollar buys you in the U.S. versus China is different. PPP accounts for that.
It's about what you can actually get for your money in each country.
So get this, using PPP, the IMF says China overtook the U.S. in 2014. But per capita GDP, how much wealth each person has on average is still way lower in China. They've come a long way, but living standards are still catching up.
It's a good reminder that size isn't everything, huh?
Absolutely. And we can't forget their global impact.
Yeah.
They're a manufacturing powerhouse, no question.
Oh, yeah.
Their manufacturing output in terms of gross value added already beats the U.S. and on the Fortune 500 list.
How many Chinese companies are there now?
It went from just 29 in 2007 to a whopping 103 in 2016.
Wow.
Crazy, right? And it's not all cheap labor anymore. China is pouring money into automation and becoming more innovative.
Deloitte, a big consulting firm, said they were the most competitive manufacturer globally back in 2016.
That's right. But they also predicted that the U.S. might get back on top by 2020 because of our focus on high-tech investments.
So it's a close race, and who knows what the future holds.
It's super interesting to see how it unfolds. And here's another thing. Wages are rising in China.
Yeah.
Way higher than places like Mexico and Vietnam, which used to be the A spots for cheap manufacturing.
Things change.
That's for sure. Now, here's something you might not have thought about. China isn't just receiving tons of foreign direct investment.
Right. FDI.
They're also major investors themselves in other countries.
Sending money out as well as taking it in.
Big time. Billions and billions flowing in and out.
What's their strategy there?
It's super strategic. They're locking down natural resources to keep growing, buying up cutting-edge technology and famous brands.
Wow.
And they're building companies that can compete globally, like when Lenovo, a Chinese company, bought IBM's PC division. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Big news.
Exactly. Now, officially, Hong Kong and some tax havens are the top destinations for Chinese investment.
Makes sense.
But the American Enterprise Institute tracks this stuff, and their data shows the U.S. as the real top recipient, even if it's not official.
Interesting. Why the discrepancy?
It's this thing called round tripping, where money goes through those other places before ending up in, say, the U.S. Adds a layer of complexity.
Sneaky.
It is. But China's leaders are also realizing that growth at any cost isn't sustainable. They've been talking about a new normal.
What's that mean exactly?
It's about sustainable growth, getting their own people to consume more, and focusing on higher quality development.
Sounds like a shift in thinking.
It is. And here's where the middle income trap comes in.
Uh-oh, what's that?
Basically, the worry is that if China can't shift from relying on cheap labor and exports to a model driven by innovation and domestic spending,
Right.
their growth will stall out, like a car stuck in the wrong gear. They've made some reforms, but their state-dominated industries and banks can make this transition tough.
Makes sense. A lot of moving parts.
And let's not forget the environment. China's had some scary events like that Tianjin explosion and those airpocalypse events. Pollution was off the charts.
Yeah, that was really bad.
It makes you think about the costs of rapid industrial growth, doesn't it?
It does. But I've also heard they're investing in clean energy and trying to protect the environment more.
They are. But to really solve these problems, they need stronger rule of law and less corruption. Those are big obstacles to change.
Yeah, I can see that.
Then there's the people. Their workforce is shrinking and their population is aging fast, partly because of that one-child policy.
No problem, I imagine.
Definitely. It threatens their whole growth model. With fewer workers and more older folks to care for, they need to innovate even more just to keep things going.
Wow, that's a lot to deal with.
And it gets more complicated. The hukou system, which limits people moving around inside China, makes things harder.
So what's next? Where's China headed?
Fast forward to the 19th Party Congress in 2017. Xi Jinping, the leader, laid out his vision. Prosperity by 2050, becoming a tech leader globally.
Ambitious.
And keeping the state in control.
No, that's interesting.
I know, right? How do you have openness and innovation while keeping tight control? It's a puzzle, not just for China, but for the whole world.
That's a balancing act for sure.
And then there's the Belt and Road Initiative. This thing's massive. It could change global trade and infrastructure with up to $8 trillion in potential investment.
$8 trillion.
Yep, no small potatoes. China's in it for the long haul, and their decisions will affect everyone. So, what can we take away from all this?
I'm all ears.
China's rise is real. It's changing everything. But they've got huge challenges ahead. It's not just about how big their economy gets.
Right.
It's about how they grow and whether it can last.
And we can't forget about Made in China 2025. It's basically their plan to dominate industries like robotics, AI, advanced manufacturing.
Sounds ambitious, but I've heard some concerns about this initiative. What's the downside?
Well, some worry that China might use some, let's say, aggressive tactics to get there.
Okay, like what?
Huge subsidies for their own companies, making it tough for foreign competitors to enter their market, even pressuring foreign companies to hand over their tech just to do business there.
That's tricky. So if I'm a U.S. tech company trying to break into China, what could I be up against?
Imagine competing against Chinese companies getting huge government support, regulations that favor local businesses, or even being told, share your tech with us, or no deal.
So it's not just about economic competition, but control over the future of tech.
Exactly. And that brings us to a big question. What does China's rise mean for the U.S.?
It's a complicated relationship, right? They're a huge potential market for American businesses.
Yeah, a growing middle class with money to spend.
But there are worries about unfair competition and intellectual property theft, as you mentioned.
This Congressional Research Service report actually points out some key challenges for the U.S. in this situation. One big one, leveling the playing field on trade.
What do you mean?
China still has a lot of state-owned enterprises getting special treatment, and they often don't play by the rules of a truly free market.
So it's not just opening up markets, but making sure everyone's playing fair. What else does the report say?
Well, there's also their push for technological dominance. The U.S. needs to invest more in research and development, especially in areas like AI, quantum computing, biotech.
We can't afford to fall behind.
Exactly. Falling behind could have big economic and strategic consequences. It's a race for the future of technology, and the stakes are high.
No kidding. And there's the geopolitical side, too. China is using its economic power to grow its influence globally, especially with the Belt and Road Initiative.
Like a modern-day Silk Road, right?
Connecting Asia, Europe, and Africa through these huge infrastructure projects.
Yeah, impressive.
What does it mean for the U.S.?
That's a good question. And there are a lot of opinions. Some say it's good for global trade and economic development. Others worry it's China's way of creating a sphere of influence, challenging U.S. interests and global leadership.
So potential for rivalry, but also for cooperation.
That's the complexity of this relationship. Remember, China's rise also offers opportunities for the U.S. There's room for collaboration on issues like climate change, global health, fighting terrorism.
Sometimes we forget that. It's easy to focus on the competition.
It is, but finding common ground can benefit both countries and the world.
Good point. We've talked a lot about the challenges China poses for the U.S., but what about challenges within China itself?
That's important. As we said, the middle income trap is a real concern.
Okay.
If they can't shift their growth model away from cheap labor and exports and move towards innovation and domestic consumption, they risk stagnation. And that would affect everyone, not just China.
It would ripple through the global economy.
And then there are the social and political issues. Growing income inequality is a major source of tension. Corruption, despite crackdowns, is still a problem.
It's hard to stamp that out completely.
It really is. And the Communist Party faces pressure to maintain control, while people increasingly demand more freedom and individual liberties.
So, beneath the economic success, there are internal tensions that could cause problems for China.
Absolutely. The U.S. needs to be aware of this. It's not just dealing with a single entity. It's about understanding the complexities of Chinese society, the potential for change, and also for instability.
A lot of factors at play. This Congressional Research Service report doesn't pretend to have all the answers, does it?
Not at all. It's more like a roadmap for navigating this complex and ever-changing landscape. Engaging with a global power like China requires more than simple solutions.
I agree. We need a sustained and multifaceted effort to understand them, to compete effectively, and to find areas where we can work together.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? All these economic and political forces and how they play out on the world stage. It's fascinating stuff.
It is, and sometimes we can get lost in the numbers and the big picture stuff, but this is about real people, their lives, the kind of world we all want to live in, and the choices we make that shape that future.
Exactly. And I think one of the key takeaways here is that China's decisions, what they do at home and on the world stage, it affects all of us.
That's a big responsibility.
It is. Whether you're a business owner, an investor, or just someone trying to understand what's going on in the world, looking at China's struggles, their wins, their losses, it can teach us a lot.
What struck me is how this report shows that it's not just about China's economic size, it's how they got there and can they keep it going. It makes you question different approaches to development and how that shifts global power.
It does. We have to rethink our ideas about economic systems, how political power works, and how technology can be both a good and a disruptive force.
This deep dive has definitely changed how I see our interconnected world. What happens in one place can really impact everyone, everywhere.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to be proactive, not just react to things as they happen. We need to build societies that can adapt, that are strong enough to handle the shifting balance of power in the world.
So it's not just about China, it's about us too, right? Understanding our own strengths and weaknesses so we're ready for whatever comes next.
Well said. And that's what makes this so interesting. It's not just dry data or politics. It's about people, how they live, and what kind of world we want to leave for the future.
I hope this has made our listeners curious, maybe even inspired them to learn more about these issues or about China's amazing culture and history.
Whatever they choose to explore, the important thing is to stay engaged, stay informed, and remember that China's story is still unfolding. We all have a part to play in shaping how that story goes.
I like that. It's not over yet. So to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into China's economic rise. We'll catch you next time.